then the bottle is new. But if you refurbish it with antiques, then the wine is old. So I think the permutations and combinations in a historic property, which is reimagined for reuse or redesigned for reuse, you don't really draw a line between past and present. The present runs into the past into the present, and the two run into. I think of it as a cyclic. Something becomes old, then you revitalize it for the future and use that time, that's the present, and come back to it. And the present keeps getting old, and the old keeps becoming the future. So how do you want me to go about it? You can show the pictures.
I'll have the presentation here, and I just switch from slide to slide. Would you like to talk about this slide? Or shall I go on to the next image?
Let's talk I can say a word or two about each thing. You know, that India is such a complex country, it's actually a continent. So even what you say for a country is not true for India, because when we are restoring in the north or in the south, the materials are different. You know, the rulers were different. We've had all the colonizers come here. We've got Portuguese, French, British, Danish, Dutch architecture. So we can't treat it all with the same way. Next. So the Neemrana story started from this small house, which is 50 kilometers from Delhi, and it's a place in the wilderness called Kohar, which has been restored once, and it has just been re-restored again because 36 years have passed since it was done. You can see a few of the interior pictures of this quickly. Yes, yes. It's very simple, but simplicity has never been a problem. I think Neemrana has flaunted that. Maybe I could talk 1 second about the word Neemranification, because people talk of restoration. It's not restore a listed building. If you restore the Taj Mahal, for example, then you're restoring it according to the purist methodology. Neemrana is about unlisted buildings. So you can take liberties with the restoration, the reconstruction, the extension, the revitalization, because the end use is completely different. And the important thing is that because it is not funded by a feudal social system, its continuity has to come from itself. So I think it's very important that the viability of that is established while this happens. So Neemranification means restoring and revitalization, using the local communities to run something that makes them proud of their heritage, and that they will run it for the future too. So that so because built to be hers, and because they had fallen into ruin. If you look at the picture on the left, these are the stables of a 14th century fort. I think perhaps also because the value of human beings has fallen to that of animals, where I think human beings can now happily live in stables. So we've done a very simple restoration, and people are very often enchanted by this. This thing about less as more. So this is yes. There's a swimming pool now because, of course, if it's warm for 8 months, you need to do something there. We could run the pictures faster too, so then we will have time to talk. You have before and after pictures. So the idea was to turn way into assets. That's something that nobody can object to, because you've got something which brings nothing to anybody, not to the local population, not to the world, not to society, not to government, to the National Exchequer. So when you turn the left into the right, then you have joy, and you have what the world needs to do at this time more and more, rather than build it next. Since we have in 1986, but everybody said they see it, they imagine people who haven't seen the ruin. So this is what a splendid property, and when you see it in the evening lit up, it actually looks like pure magic, which it is. But there are also lifts and so on, other facilities which are concealed within that. So I think we have to talk. We'll talk about that. See, this is the same place where you were scared to enter a ruin because there were bats and civet cats, and you had to duck between cobwebs and trees. Today, it's a joy to visit the whole place. And when people ask, what is there to see? You've got 6 acres of Fort Palace built at 14 levels. So you have a lot of seeing to do. Next. These are just different views of it. We could run this. The interiors, for example, most of the furniture which is used is old. And this was the court, where the Court of Justice, which was a large space with arches. But they didn't span very wide areas because of the there was no metal. This is a French suite, which is created in the colonial part, built in the 1920s, before the family moved out in 1940. So it's also been done. There's an English suite, a French suite. So people enjoy the spaces. This is an Art Deco room, because Neemrana also went through that stage. So even if you've stayed in one, let's say in the white, the moon suite, then different, the art is different, the lights are different, the fabric are different, the views are different. This is in the Sikh colonial architecture, and we could just run through it quickly so that people get to see. You see, the arches were blocked. It was used as an office. The ceilings are 30 feet high. You could happily do it. So people leave the city to replenish, their mind and body. And so when you sleep in a room like this, which has so much space, I think it's therapeutic. Next. This is a view into the big gardens, which were called the company gardens. Now, if you look at the picture on top, you wouldn't imagine that it could ever become what it has become below. It's just on the edge of the sea. It's called Bungalow on the Beach, and it was a Danish property, then lived in by the British. And it's been restored very simply because there were some traces of little blue paint and so on. Next. I think there are a few interior shots, yes. So this is again the same before and after. There was the tsunami, which had blown away all this, and we rebuilt the whole thing. You see the decor here. Today's people wouldn't use this kind of decor. So you enter a historic space, which was a ruin, but we collect things which could have been used in that period. This is a very beautiful property in the middle of India, in Madhya Pradesh. The part that has been added to it, it's very difficult to tell which is new and which is old. And that, I think, is a great joy. This is a beautiful building surrounded by water. So in summer, you could go under it and rest in the siesta, have a siesta in the afternoon. This is up in the Himalayan foothills, where there were colonial British bungalows, where it snows at Christmas time, and each of them have been restored, and you feel like you're entering the 19th century. It's very familiar for people when they come there. They have a feeling that they've already lived here, and there are also contemporary spaces which have been created sometimes depending on the sort of space available. This is a Scottish building. And Tijara is what Esther spoke about. This was such a grand ruin. If you see the picture before this is the before and after this, there are hanging gardens and so on. So it's completely a transformed area. You can't really talk about architecture without visiting it. So one day, when the world improves and travel does, you must visit and see this for yourself, where work is ongoing with all the craftsmen. Next. Yes. So just after it opened, it immediately won the best resort award, which is perhaps misleading, because what is the best resort? What are the pointers you're looking at? But the feeling of being in such a splendid place. Here are the ruins, and you can see the hanging gardens being cut into the hill, because this was never completed. This was left incomplete, so it gave us the liberty to use it without any drawings, without any descriptions. So the new areas were sunk into the hill, so you don't see them, and the old areas were restored and enhanced and made livable. Next. Here again you see the before and after pictures. The same arch which was left incomplete is the trefoil arch. And the floors are also kept very simple and geometric, so that they go with the heavy red sandstone pillars, double pillars. This has become a garden court with a lot of palms inside it, and as you can see on top, the two floors. Yes, this is the same place, shot from the same spot. Even since the photographs were made, actually, it has changed a lot, because every monsoon the garden becomes more splendid. This is the barren hill without the fortifications that enclose the three palaces. And so it is very difficult to photograph, because it's quite sprawled, and when you do wide angles, they distort certain areas. Next. So the camel is actually sitting where the chairs are now. So it's very difficult to imagine that it could have been that, or that it has become this, because if you have old textiles, old furniture, old flooring patterns, and create a space which is vast and splendid, it's what people expect when they travel. This is the sunken area. You don't see the pool from anywhere till you get to the area, and it's sunk into the hill, or it's sunk into a slope, so that you have a very beautiful view of the pool. And it's a great pleasure. It's 100 feet large, and each room here is done by one contemporary Indian painter, designer. So they're each completely different, and there'll also be a kind of museum of early 20th century art and design. This little turret is designed as a village fair. This is a suite done with waste materials, broken porcelain, and I've designed the floors to be like daris, like floor coverings, because is there a next picture? I think there should be. Then this one. These are all chip plates which are painted with mangoes and stuck on the ceiling. So it becomes a bit of a fantasy, and there's a swing. So when you swing in good weather or in air conditioning, and there's furniture from Maharaja palaces in Gujarat, 40s, curious furniture which doesn't necessarily fit in houses. And I think we will have time for a discussion after this. I hope so. So we could hurry up with this. I think you've got a fair idea. So this is what that ruin looks, a ruin that was put to bid, and nobody in India wanted to bid for it. That is what I find, that there is a total lack of interest for the past. And what we are building today is not necessarily of the beauty and of the value that it will have 100 years from now. So I think what is important, or what is interesting about the Neemrana work, is that it defies an easy categorization. So if modernity, because we're thinking in a new way, in a new way, because modernity is a state of mind. It's something in the mid 19th century, let's say. Something that happened in art, and modernity was connected with in India with Calcutta, because they had associated and affiliated themselves with empire. Look how splendid this is. Of course, you can make drone pictures now, so you can enjoy it from where the creator surveys the world, not necessarily from a human point of view. Yeah. And we are our thinking is modern, because we are waking up old places, but it's doing it in a very different way. It's a new grammar which is retro-progressive, if I might say, because you take a step backwards, but you're also being progressive, because you're waking up the past. You're walking into a graveyard and touching the graves with your wand, and people are emerging from it, and there's a certain joy in doing that. And that power, the more you use it, the more you want to use it. So when people went back in modernism in India, let's say in art, they went back to the miniatures, because the miniatures were so different from what had happened, the Impressionists and Post-Impressionists. But then they realized that that wasn't enough, so they needed to go back even further to Ajanta, to the frescoes, and eventually the modernists like Tagore and Ram Kinkar in Shantiniketan go back to tribal art, like Picasso goes to African art, because it's not enough to take one step back when you're looking at yourself. So in our case, we are indebted to the design of the building that we are touching. I'm not saying to myself, here is a 15th century building and I want to make it or Renaissance. I am not an architect for a starter, and I'm not busy stamping my stamp on it. I think the beauty of an old building is the language that it is speaking to you, and you have to be alert to listen to that. You have to be beholden. It's a debt to the past that is have in 11, you can complete the rest. But I think this whole thing about saying it's an intervention, therefore we need to make it in chrome and glass or brick, so that people should know, is for dead civilizations, not for India. Would you like to intervene at this stage? I notice you want to say something.
Well, I would like to ask a few questions. I mean, the projects we've just seen, they are really extremely ambitious. And I'm in touch with many people and many also citizen-driven heritage initiatives who really try to fight for buildings, that are being demolished and, replaced by very mediocre buildings that don't even last for 8 years, and then they start falling down already. But you see, yes. The thing is, if you dream and you don't have a business sense, if you don't have your feet firmly on the ground, this will not work. So, in order to maintain these buildings, idealism is not enough. There are many skills necessary. So I would really like to know, because this is such a success story. I mean, you started with, the small Haveli and then Neemrana. But maybe, you see, when we see someone at the top, like you are, how can we start this? How can people, young people, or people who take the initiative in their particular location? There are so many initiatives, whether it's Hyderabad or Patna or Calcutta. Many people want to protect these, beautiful historic buildings. How can you actually? What is feasible? What does it take? Why do you not give up? Why did nobody want to touch even something like Neemrana? How can this actually get up like a phoenix out of the ashes? What are the steps in between that we haven't really seen in this success story?
I think, it's you can only retrofit your story, because, there's this wonderful quotation from Gandhi who says, find purpose and the means will follow. If you're really passionate about doing something, then it happens, or it happens because you make it happen. You just don't dream about it and talk about it. I meet people, I have friends, and I think Well, my family, we became refugees in 1947. Everything we came down to zero. I think that's a great start. I think I believe very strongly in a quote which I read much later in life, which says destiny has two ways to ruin you, either by denying you what you want or by giving it to you. So I think that the problem of the world today is that it has been given too much. So
I think we lost Aman. You're back.
Am I there?
Yes, you're back.
Okay. Now I'm saying that it's important to act every single day, because the only asset that we have is time, which is limited, which is much more important than money. So, because money has never been a substitute for perseverance, because too much money leads to decadence, leads to all kinds of things. So if you are not always alert and putting your money to the best use, and it's not just about me, because if you see the team at Neemrana, we have so many 100 people now, every single person gets schooled into that. So when we have the manager of a hotel, we love the idea, we have a manager or in gardens or in details, we have people in housekeeping who have developed a very fine eye for textiles, for print. So because they've shown me for, this is 36 years have passed. So human beings, and I think Indians, are particularly skilled and sharp to learn. So if I was doing a white and indigo room, and when we didn't have WhatsApp and all this, could send these people, and they would come back with exactly what I would have chosen, sometimes even better than what I would have chosen, because there's always a difference between your thinking and your aesthetic, and then you put it to a new use. So I think that there are no rules. You cannot say if you did this, and this Neemrana will happen, because every battle is individual. But I think intuition is something that education often tells us to suppress. I think intuition is important. To see a human being in a crowd and fall in love, it comes out of vibrations, out of intuition. So if you visit a ruin, like people say to me, how did you think of investing in Neemrana, putting all your energy and money of the moment? Suppose it hadn't worked. Now that option I never gave myself. I didn't believe that it would never work. Because if you stand on the ramparts of a ruin and watch a sunrise or a sunset or a river or the sea, tomorrow, if you restore it, you're only waking up there. It can only be better. Haven't all of us had the feeling leaving a fantastic monument when they're closing in the evening and say, I wish I could stay long, because that place has charmed you. So somebody came, and a famous decorator from came, reminded her of what is it? She said it's just that you can also wake up in it now, because there are gardens and water channels and all that, but you have to leave it. You cannot enjoy it enough. So so intuition is one thing, and taste also. When you are doubtful about taste, it's always better to do under rather than over, because there is, there are materials. If you've got a wall which has got, Neemrana is made out of 2 billion-year-old rocks. So why would you plaster it? Why would you put a veneer on it? Why would you, do all kinds of things to wash it away? Because the reason that people are there are for that. So if they have a love affair with the wall, which is 556 years old, it's a wonderful affair. And so we have to do less rather than more. And because we're repurposing the building, I would even call it a concealed modernism, because the facilities are hidden. You have warm water, you have air conditioning, you have plumbing, you have sewage, you have treatment plants, water treatment. All that is there, but it's concealed because that is the modern aspect of it. We cannot now be wasting the amount of water we use for so many people. But so if whatever
Aman, still, it sounds so easy. I think, especially people who've never lived in India, there are so many difficulties to overcome, starting from electricity not being available in the village, from water, from I'm listening to so many people who are fighting for buildings where the people in the specific cities don't encourage them. They do everything to help demolish a building, so they don't get the permission. I mean, how do you? These practicalities, opposition and so on, people, even although you would do everything to promote the life of the communities, they will still try to prevent you from doing this and so on. So please tell us about these everyday challenges that are not at all mentioned. It sounds like an easy ride, but it is really not. These everyday challenges, how did you overcome them? Please give us one example of this and how you were dealing with a real challenge, a problem where you really, because I talk to these people, they start crying because their best efforts are being torpedoed.
They're absolutely right. But you see, if I told you, I asked you a question, how it took us to get elected. You want to answer that question? We started with a ruin on a hill. We said we'll get a generator and we'll generate electricity. And then we waited and we waited. But how many years should a normal person's perseverance run out? You want to answer that?
No.
22 years. Okay. So when you say it's exasperating, because if I had it earlier, we would have saved so much money. We would have, created less problems for the environment. But the thing is, it's nobody's business. And because India has so many other priorities, and historic buildings are not in the first 5. It's about food, shelter, employment, medicine, health, education. All those things are, and I would say they are more important, because you don't want to sound like Marie Antoinette and say that the gold is peeling off my palace, but when the people were starving outside. So I think that India has to have a balanced growth. You can't say we've just done the Chinese model that we've done and we've forgotten everything of the past. We've just got factories which are producing. I think we have the wisdom, we have the wealth, and we have the means, because the people are so clever that we should have a balanced development of the past, of
the
and of the future, so that we don't ruin any of these.
Speaking from my experience with other owners of historic houses in different places of the world, what I see a lot is the need of people. They feel they want to be autonomous from everything, whether it comes to energy, for instance. So I see a lot of alternative energy resources being explored. When I do kind of interior design projects, they ask me to bear in mind, now this is a stove for gas, but I want to have a possibility to connect the stove with my own produced energy, which can be pellets. Austria, for instance, is a tiny country in comparison with India, with only 8 million people, less people than in Delhi. But they do very well in alternative energy production. And I've seen some really innovative kind of heating systems, which is, of course, important there, using cherry stones, using waste from coffee, because, you have many coffee houses also in Austria and so on. So these are interesting possibilities. I'm looking at very interesting research in Israel, for instance, the Blaustein Center. They learn from historic buildings to develop buildings without AC, without even a fan, in the desert. Yeah. So these are interesting ways to really connect also historic buildings, to learn from this and connect it with low energy buildings for the future. So how do you feel about this?
We're moving in that direction, but it's not easy. We've had For example, people come and talk to us about solar energy, but the beauty of Neemrana is the terraces. So if we put solar panels on all the terraces and people come out of their rooms to face them, it's a problem. If we put them on the hill, we cannot, because India is India. So children will run away with them, break the glass, because people have fun doing all this, because there's so much disparity of lifestyle. So it's always fun to it used to be to steal a little rear view mirror of a car and so on, but now as India is progressing and as everybody has more, so there's more tolerance with other standards of living, and people are beginning to understand their heritage. It's 35 years is more than a generation. So in that the villages where we are, when we began the work, they said, here's a crazy man. When I first arrived in Neemrana, there were articles in the newspaper to say that I was a smuggler because I had a black beard, and that I was going to do some smuggling activity.
No, we lost you. Maybe you're...
Am I there?
Oh, sorry, Aman. Yes, okay, last sentence. Yes, so you are exploring these kind of alternative energy methods. I've seen some interesting tiles, now too expensive still. Elon Musk is doing research on these, using slate tiles for instead of these ugly solar panels. So I think, again, many interesting things are being developed.
Remain open to. We have to have, when new technologies arrive, they're so expensive.
Yes.
So we're not funded by God, so we wait a while to see first their efficiency and whether we can afford them, and then we.
I would like to also ask you I would like to hear about your strategies in the combating the coronavirus pandemic. I recently heard about a statistics, I think from UNESCO, that about 10% of the world's museums and historic house museums will never open again because of the coronavirus. But on the other hand, I've seen really, especially when the French chateaux started opening, people were coming, many people were supporting the chateau, coming especially to the gardens. And also, sometimes, of course, the rooms are bigger or there's no central, AC and so on. So it's actually safer also in historic houses to visit them.
It's encouraging to know that, because, if let's say Tijara, it's 8 acres. So if 20 rooms are booked, let's say there'll be 40 or 50 people in 8 acres of gardens and terraces and so on. And we have individual air conditioning so I think it's very helpful. People are very confident, and we've had it's been I think 2 weeks or a little more than that, and I personally am always optimistic, but still I wasn't sure how many people would come, but to have 20 rooms booked and 30 rooms booked is very encouraging, because people, as you said, have been jailed and they want to run free. So where would they go? They wouldn't go to a corridor hotel, because all the rooms are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the air conditioning runs through. So they don't feel that so safe. But in Neemrana, in Tijara, in Kisoli, it's a whole fort palace. So once you enter, once everybody is asepticized, when the food items enter, so I think we are being even we're taking too many precautions, but it's better than taking too few.
What kind of precautions are you taking? For instance, you used to have the wonderful buffets. Are you still having the buffets? How are you responding to this?
No. So we began by doing only table service, but then when there are more people, we've got a new kind of glass which covers the buffet dishes, So, but people don't come and serve themselves. So nobody touches the serving spoon. If our servers serve the people.
Oh, I see.
The whole thing is that you don't touch it. And then now we have this plexiglass cover. So suppose somebody is there, actually we do it at the table, but if somebody comes for a refilling or whatever, they cannot cough into it. Like you have a screen.
Yeah.
We're trying these things. We're all learning, Everybody's yes.
Do you encourage kind of long-term stays? Do you have special offers for long-term stays at the moment?
Yes, we do. In fact, people on their own, the government of India has made a policy for the mountains because, you know, they want to keep them pure. They said you must stay 7 days. So that's good for us because, you know, people come for 7 days. Also, you know, a 1-day holiday, 1-night holiday isn't really a holiday because you drive 1 day and you drive back the other day. So you remember the highway more than the rest. But if it's also a luxury to be able to afford a week there, but we're making it happen.
Right. I would like to know, I mean, Neemrana hotels, the purpose of these historic buildings are to use them as hotels. How do you feel about other kind of business opportunities from, let's say, especially, again, I find that this is a response to the coronavirus. People start gardening, people start growing their own tomatoes and so on because, you know, we were cut off and so on, and we couldn't find fresh food and so on. This also happened to me, for example. It was difficult. And you know, since you produce these things for many of the you know, properties as well, have you thought about you know, branching out? Or for instance, you know, of course you used to have the museum shops. I mean, the kind of, you know, hotel shops and crafts.
We did, but we're not really shopkeepers. You know, that is a different. They arose because people, when we opened, said we love this fabric, we love this porcelain. So we, you know, can we take it away? Because, you know, so we thought that if we were applying our good taste and initiative to design something, we would order a little more and put it in a shop. So I've had people ring up and say, they said, there's a lady, she's so much in love with this bed cover, she absolutely wants to take it away. She could have stolen it, but she's wanting to pay for it and take it. So, you know, I mean, you know, I said, okay, let her take it because I knew where we had got it from. But then we did the shops, but it became very complicated, you know, and it's very different. So now what we do is, you were talking about kitchen, you know, what's called
accessories, and you had some fashion items, you had crafts items and so on, several in the past.
But what we are now doing is, because in all the hotels we grow our vegetables and we've increased the scale of that. And we actually encourage people. The weather is not very wonderful at the moment. It's warm and sultry, and the rains have just begun. So in better weather, we found that people are interested. You know, if you go to tell people there's a huge kitchen garden, go and find your carrots and your radish and a salad for you, because, you know, there's limited activity also. You're not supposed to swim at this moment.
Yeah. Right.
Try and drink beer, but not exactly an equivalent to swimming. So, but people are very, people realize you have a problem. People are very cooperative. I think that we're very, very happy. I think if our guests are happy with us, we are also very happy.
Have you thought of new kind of entertainments or activities for people who are staying now at the properties who can't do the things that they used to be able to do, like not using the swimming pool and so on? Have you thought of any alternative kind of occupations or?
Well, you know, actually we thought of many things, but you know, the weather is really, you know, because you're in India, you don't really want to be outdoors at this time, you know.
Yes.
So,
right. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's only the mornings and the evenings are okay. You know, you can do yoga, you can, and even having tea on a palace rampart in the evening, whatever the weather is, because there's a breeze by the evening. You know, it's a difference from your house, your apartment, your office, your cabin. It's fighting the claustrophobia of the pandemic, of your lifestyle. So people are happy with that, but we were bound.
Thank you, Aman. And I think, you know, surely the audience would like to ask some questions. So you can use the chat box to, and let me just check, let me have a look at the chat box to see if there are any questions. Let me see if you raised your hand, you know, there is this little hand, you can ask a question and I can try to unmute you. So let me have a look at the chat to see any kind of questions.
Yeah, we should
Yes,
have announced.
Philip, I'm so pleased to welcome you. We've known each other for so many years now, and Philip Gatchis, I should say, he is one of the greatest craftsmen in the UK, and the expert on plaster. He has worked on some of the most incredible historic buildings, and Apethorpe Hall, for instance, which is a wonderful building he was just recently working on. And he says, yes, the Neemrana model is similar to the Landmark Trust in the UK, but much grander on scale. Yes.
I'm aware of that.
You're aware of the Landmark Trust.
Yeah.
It's actually a really wonderful idea. They use small gazebos or sometimes a railway station, and they fill this with life, and you can rent it, and they actually gave some of the properties to NHS workers during the pandemic, which was particularly nice. Yeah, and their most famous building is probably the Pineapple. I must say, I've always wanted to stay in the Pineapple. It's a folly, a garden folly in the shape of a pineapple, which is wonderful. So let me just.
We should do exchange programs when the world will open up, because we were talking about this a few days ago, that actually there has been a lot of interaction between our cultures. If you look at the Pietra Dura in the Taj Mahal, it comes from Florence.
Right.
And yes, and we have
here from one guest, and I actually wanted to ask the same, namely Nicola. Please tell us, which is your favorite? Which is your favorite project or building? I would like to ask you the same.
You ask.
Sorry, could you hear the question, Aman? Sometimes I think the internet connection. Aman, maybe last time we spoke, it was the better connection. Maybe you can move closer to the Wi-Fi source. So I'm in the meantime, I'm looking at some of the other questions.
So somebody's asking, which is your favorite place? So I think in different weathers and different, it's like asking somebody, which of your 12 children do you like more? I think you have different reasons to like different things. That in summer I like Rajasthan less.
Although actually the heat sometimes it can be better than in Haryana. Haryana is so humid, and I find in Rajasthan it's actually a much more pleasant heat for my liking. And Philip, he was asking, do you have any ongoing projects? Yes, I'd be really interested in that as well, Aman.
Yes, well, Tijara is ongoing. In fact, all our projects are ongoing in some way or the other. When we finish with one thing, then we think of the other. For example, at Neemrana, we've done an Italian, an Indo-Italian restaurant, because we offer a thali in which you have Italian and Indian food. And I think I sent you some pictures of these extraordinary rocks. Did they send you some pictures?
Yes.
Yes. So what the rocks are so amazing. They're 2 billion years old. It's the oldest fold mountain in the world. So when we scrape them, rather than cover them with building, with a wall, we just lit them with sulfur lights. And people just walk in and say, they're amazed, because it's fun to sit there and just watch every single person come and react to that. So I think it's very important to wear new eyes and become a traveler in your own property and say, what is it that people will first see? What is it that will impress them? And sometimes you get immune to ugly things too. So when I visit, because I don't live in any of these properties, I tell our people, I said, I can't believe that you don't see.
Oh, internet.
Help us.
Yeah. Aman, this is another interesting question from Param, from Gujarat. Hi there. Nice that you have joined. He's also a heritage expert from Ahmedabad. The question is, how did you actually approach the owners? And if a fort is completely ruined, then how did you finance this? And how, I don't know, some of these are on a long-term lease basis, or what is the kind of business model for these buildings? Unfortunately, Aman, we cannot hear you. Try to move a little closer to the, yeah.
It was very nobody bought. So in the beginning, we bought a few ruins, but then that's not the model, because the whole idea is not to possess. It's actually to reshape the world if you can. And now that people understand what we can do, people willingly properties, and each one has a different story. Sometimes the owner has the money and can put something, sometimes they have no money. So we have to make it work for both people, because something that doesn't work for the owner won't work for us. And if they are too greedy, the project will never.
Actually, this in association with this question, I would like to know, you told me, I think, this nice story of the love story relating to Tijara Palace. To what extent do you bring to life the people who lived in these buildings, or the story of each individual building? Aman, you are frozen on the screen. I'm not sure whether you can hear me, but you are frozen. And I hear the question about the furniture. Yes, let me take a note of this. Where did you actually source the furniture? And I think I've seen some really beautiful lamps. Are they? Do you make them? Do you have a workshop or so? I'd also like to know more about this.
No, I actually use. I design the lamps because we take old tidbits, parts of furniture, extensions of beds, little parts here and there, and we make them. We need to make them in pairs very often. And when they're not in pairs, we use them on study tables as single lamps. But I think one has to be constantly inventive, because a lot of bric-a-brac is important to turn into. Like, people use a pillar base for something, and you can find all kinds of uses for pillar bases or capitals or anything.
Yeah.
So, once I bought 200 chairs, 200 broken chairs from the Maharaja of Ayodhya, because they were all stacked. And out of those 200 chairs, we made 60 chairs. So it was like an operation, so you change the arms and the legs or whatever, but they were 60.
And yes, Aman, because the connection was interrupted, we'll have, I think, 5 more minutes before we conclude. With the owners, how does it work? Does he have a say? Do you have a long-term lease? Because you also need some security since you invest a lot in the building. How is this personal consideration?
No, if there's a property which needs not too much help, then we can do a shorter lease. But the idea.
Unfortunately, the connection is bad. This is such interesting questions. In the meantime, I'm just looking. Aman, can you just repeat this, please? Because you were interrupted.
Yes. No. I'm saying. No. So what did you last hear? I don't know.
Sometimes we do a short-term lease.
Yes. So the thing is, suppose we get an utter ruin and we need to spend, let's say, $1 million. Then we must plan that we must get $1,001 at least, and recover the funds so that we're able to. So the idea is not to be greedy on both sides, because their purpose is to see their building done, and our purpose is also to see the building done. And since neither of us is really funding, we are funding it, but we also need to fund it by selling the property. So we cannot make it unviable, and we are not of the school foolish rich people will come and pay. People started right in the beginning to say, wow, you're only charging $100. This is $1,000 experience. So I would say to such people, if you're really so happy, please pay us the $1,000. But of course, nobody paid, And they said things like, it's not a 5-star hotel, it's a 1,000,000-star hotel. But then, because they were looking at the sky, So those are all expressions of gratitude, of experiential ecstasy, if one can say. But the reality is not that. You have to sustain it at a level where people say, God, if I spend one more night, I'll be ruined. Many people work on that. They'll say, how much can we fleece them? And I think the Henry Ford model is not how little you give for $1, it's how much you give for $1 that makes your business successful.
I mean, is there any kind of reward system for Neemrana friends? I mean, people who come and, stay regularly or something like this?
Yes, we have a Friends of Neemrana program, which gives them discounts in other hotels. They had a discount at the shops also, which we don't have anymore. And we inform them of the special things that happen, so that the people hear about it afterwards and say, wow, so you had this great dance or this great ballet, I missed it, because people can't cope up with all that's happening in the world. So we have that, and people are very happy with that. Yes, they have a sense of ownership, and we have lots of repeat guests, and they know our staff by name, which is wonderful. And they go from one hotel.
I must also say, whenever I visit, and the people, I've always made friends or met people that I really like, because somehow we have so many things in common. People who go to historic house museums, they value, yes. History and so on. So, the last time I went to Kasroli Fort, I met the correspondent of the FT, and I personally love to read the FT because I think they have a wonderful culture section. And, we talked about some historic houses at the time. I was organizing a water and heritage excursion for the center. And then, she did a detour. She loved the idea that I'd presented to her, and she actually went to visit Deeg Palace afterwards.
So beautiful. Deeg is outstandingly beautiful, but yes. It's a pity that the government doesn't understand that it could be a great hotel too.
Or yes. There's nothing. You cannot spend 1 rupee to benefit the local community. There is no shop, no cafe, nothing, and it's one of the most spectacular water architecture.
The architecture is so outstanding because it is the best of the Jat and the Rajput architecture mixed together. But there are buildings all around it which are so beautiful.
I agree.
That if you were to do that, the last chief minister did do a wonderful project there, but it's a museum project, and it's not a place where you can wake up in. Yes.
Yes, and some of it isn't. And one thing that I wanted to mention at the time, there was a conservation expert from the Austrian government. And, he was just in awe seeing all the, he loved Kasroli and Neemrana. And it's just something so unique about the Indian properties. I mean, even people who deal with historic buildings every day of their life, this sense of awe and wonder is just unbeatable in India. It's just, there is a certain magic about these buildings that is unique. And it's a privilege to be working in this field. And I would like to close with these remarks. We have next Friday, we have another speaker. It's Bonnie Dundlot and his wonderful initiative for Marwari horses. We have many exciting speakers lined up. So I hope you join us again. I hope you'll be active. Please have a look at our Facebook group, Center for Historic Houses of India. Aman, I'd like to thank you so much for taking your time. You could have used this time.
I'd like to say it's nice of you that you speak of India, but we are in awe of the work that happens in Europe. Every time I travel there, whether it's Austria or France or Italy or England, we say how fantastic. So I think this love for each other and this admiration and awe for each other must continue. Let's not imbalance it and say, that we outweigh anybody.
Thank you. These are wonderful words, Aman. Please join our roundtable in September with the Indian and European palace owners. And I'd love to invite you and also present your model there. They would be very interested, the European owners, to hear about your idea.
Thank you so much. It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you, everyone, for coming, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.